Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday Night Rotor Talk Live, Season 2, Episode 26. We have a very special guest in the house tonight, and I mean very special guest. And we're going to talk to Scott here in just a minute. Just wanted to cover some housekeeping items. We've settled back into our normal spot at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just want to let you know that we had we tried it at 9 o'clock, and we're going to settle on the 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Just to let you know that. Another housekeeping item, a reminder, Spin Up has gone up, I believe, $25, and it's being held October 19th, and it will go up another $25 next month. So if you're interested, please make sure that you click on the link and get your tickets. You want to get there because there's a limit of 200 people, and slots are filling up fast as far as that is concerned. The other housekeeping item is of a personal one. My daughter was due on the 29th. She has not had her baby yet. And if she doesn't have her baby, the baby will be born July 8th. That's when labor will be induced. So we're all having some thoughts and prayers that baby will come before then. So with all of that out of the way, I want to introduce our very special guest, Scott Parazynski. Now, Scott is CEO of Fluidity Tech. And they have come up with an incredible product called the FT Aviator. Scott also has probably one of the unbelievable experiences of a lifetime. He has been a shuttle astronaut at least, I believe, 5 times. He's taken 8 spacewalks. He's completed what many consider the most dangerous spacewalk ever. He has also climbed Mount Everest, and he's also a physician. So with all of that being said, Scott, if you could just give us a little bit of a brief bio about yourself, and then we'll start with the questions.
Well, thanks so much for having me on your show, first off, Bill. And you actually gave a really nice intro. I'm flattered to have an opportunity to present my company, Fluidity Technologies, and our first product, which is the FT Aviator. It's a really unique and wonderful way in one hand to control all the flight axes of your drone. So ultimately, within a few minutes of flying with this thing, flight becomes almost a subconscious act. It's really a lot of fun, but it also gives you a lot more precision, a lot more intuitive control. And so tying this back to my personal background, I've had the opportunity, the privilege really to fly in space and to work in a variety of different fields, including medicine and aviation. I've flown lots of different assets, whether aircraft or robotic arms in space, and seen things that work really, really well and things that really struggle. And actually, the genesis of our product, the FT Aviator, stems from wanting to improve surgical robotics. I'd seen the surgical robotics that are currently in use that require lots and lots of training and involve these really complex systems. I knew that there had to be a better way to move an asset through physical or virtual space. And so what came from all that kind of analysis was a series of inventions that led to this product, which is the FT Aviator. And we'll talk about it here as part of your show, but it puts all of the flight control into a single hand, and then it gives you the opportunity with your non-dominant hand to control the camera assets and the responsiveness of the controller. And I think folks are really going to love it.
Let me jump in here. Let me jump in and just kind of back up just 1 second, Scott. I would be in trouble if I didn't ask you some really cool questions about the things you've done in your past, because my guys will be right on top of me. We're going to talk about the FT Aviator, but I'm curious to know, what was more difficult, preparing and emotionally and physically to go into space, or preparing emotionally and physically to go up Mount Everest?
Yeah, it's a great question, Curtis. And they're both fully involved, immersive, life-changing experiences. I wouldn't trade either one of them for anything. I feel so lucky to have been able to go to both of those places, and they do require an incredible amount of commitment, both on the individual's part, but also on one's family and friends. But when we go up into space, there's a finite amount of energy and I would say nervousness about the risk of launch. It's a lot. It's 7 million pounds of thrust to get you safely off of the planet.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of energy coming back home. And then there's risk associated with going outside on spacewalks. But I would have to say, being out on the slopes of Mount Everest, each and every second of every day, it takes about 2 months to climb Mount Everest. You feel like you're in harm's way. You're cold. You're running and working at red line. You're hypoxic. You're dehydrated. You really feel the life threat. The stress is much, much higher, I've got to say, on an Everest expedition because of just that ever-present sense of I'm in a place that people really weren't meant to spend a whole lot of time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not exactly the answer I expected, but that's some really good insight. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, we appreciate that.
Sure.
So Ron and Marcus, go ahead and ask Scott some questions.
Well, I'll let Marcus go first because he actually has the product almost in hand.
Well, soon. I did get the email that it should ship on July 19th, so I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, I'm one of the guys type of flyers that I have a big problem with cross coupling. I'll try and do a droney or something, and inevitably I'm in an inadvertent yaw or something like that.
Right.
So really excited about flying my Phantom 4 and the Mavic 2 with it. But I have a question, an astronaut question.
Sure.
So I know that you flew a lot of missions, and you flew on the Atlantis, the Discovery, and the Endeavor. Is there any difference in the hardware on those, or were they basically duplicates of each other?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And in fact, all the shuttles had subtle differences between them. So the very first orbiter, which is Columbia, that we took to the skies, in April of 1981, had more sensor technology built into it because we didn't know how the thermal protection system would work, for example, and it was heavier. In fact, that very first launch, they actually painted what we know as the orange external tank white for some unknown reason. It was 800 pounds of unnecessary weight. But yeah, so there were very subtle differences between each orbiter, but functionally they all performed more or less the same way. Only someone who was really deep into the weeds of operations would be able to tell the differences between them.
Yeah. Well, as drone people, we kind of get hardware centric, Yeah.
Yeah. So the later shuttles, Endeavor was the last addition to the shuttle fleet, and it was the lightest weight. We had learned how to build shuttles more efficiently. We'd gotten rid of areas that weren't necessary. Over time, actually, the shuttle was enhanced substantially. So we went from, steam gauges, kind of tube technology to electronic displays. But at its core, it was a pretty basic 1970s level operating system. So we had 5 general purpose computers that, my iWatch right here has more computing power than one of the GPCs we had on the shuttle. I mean, it's really remarkable what they were able to condense down into the technology that was available in the late 70s to launch that complex vehicle.
Yeah, and I was a child of the 60s, and I grew up literally watching from the Mercury missions to the Gemini missions to the Apollo missions, sitting in front of the black and white TV, watching them. So, I'm of that generation that always saw the promise of space travel. And one of the things that I've always wondered about is I always thought that by the turn of the century, by the year 2000, for sure there would have been people living and working on the moon and maybe even mining asteroids and who knows what else. Why hasn't that? I'm just interested in your opinion why that never took place.
Yeah, I'm disappointed too. I'll be honest. I can say that now that I'm no longer wearing a blue suit and I don't have to directly represent the agency. I think, I think what's happened with the International Space Station program is wonderful, and we're doing incredible engineering and cutting edge scientific research there. But as a kid, I wanted to be the Neil Armstrong of Mars. I wanted to be the the guy that set the first boot print down on Mars. And I think we have sidestepped several opportunities. It is a daunting challenge to go visit another planetary body. It's a long way. There are technological and health risks that have to be considered, but we have the wherewithal to do it. And in fact, I think what we've learned through the ISS program is that we can do it better by working together with our international colleagues. So I think that's a really great stepping stone for, I hope, going back to the moon in the not too distant future. And ultimately, our human destiny is to go to Mars. But I think one of the problems that our space program has faced is that we have not taken the long view. Things that are really hard they take resilience, they take a lot of time and focused investment. And each presidential administration, and I don't want to point fingers and alienate half of the audience, but with each subsequent presidential administration, the focus of the program has changed, and that sets us back. So we've had earlier goals of going directly to Mars. Then we're going to go to the moon first, and then on to Mars. Then we're going to go visit an asteroid. Now it looks like we may be going back to the moon and then on to Mars. I think it's important as a nation that we set our sights on tangible, achievable goals and then work relentlessly to make it happen. And independent of who controls Congress, who controls the White House, let's create a 10-year plan as we do for NASA's science programs. And I think we can actually get there in 10 or 15 years.
That's great. I agree. That's exactly right. I'll pass it off to Ron. Ron, what do you got?
Hello, Scott, and welcome to the show. I really appreciate you coming on. It's an honor to be on a show with an astronaut and a mountain climber and everything. And I like Marcus. I'm a child of the '60s or whatever. I was 9 years old when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, and my mother was so intent on me staying awake for the event happening, and I think I nodded off and just saw the replay or whatever. But on that note, I want to ask you, what inspired you to become an astronaut? Is it a single moment or anything, a defining moment, as they like to say?
Well, Ron, I don't want to make you feel old, but I was 7 years old that night in July. July 20th, 1969, 50 years ago. And of course, this is the 50th anniversary year. And that was a defining moment in my life. I remember it vividly. And even prior to that, in school, that they would wheel the big TV into the classroom when there was a launch, and then every kid on the block wanted to become an astronaut. And I just never grew out of that goal, I suppose. It certainly was solidified when Neil and Buzz, walked on the moon, the Sea of Tranquility, on July 20th, 1969. But I'd already had the inklings that that's something that I'd like to do. And my father, I was very lucky. My dad worked on the Apollo program. He worked for the Boeing Airplane Company, helping design and test the first stage and the F1 engines of the Saturn V booster, that mighty rocket that took the rocket ship through the densest part of the atmosphere. So the most powerful rocket ship ever made. And so I had this front row seat to the entire program, and so that probably played a role as well.
It's a great story. Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to move on to the Aviator and just get some basics. I mean, I've looked around a little bit, but a lot of people in the audience may not know that, so I'm going to ask some basic questions. I'll start with the two-part. The Aviator, it's only for DJI drones, and then which DJI drones will it work with?
Sure. Yeah. So we had to make a strategic decision as we were developing this product. An area where a lot of companies fail is they try to do too much too early. And so if you look at the drone marketplaces, you guys are all experts, of course, but 70 to 80% of the world's drones come from one company with the initials DJ and I. And so we built our first product around the software developer kit, the SDK for DJI. But we have a platform now that we can adapt for any drone in the world. Now, it's going to take some additional investment in engineering cost to make that come about, but the hard work has been done. So for DJI, we're able to support from the Mavic Air essentially all the way up to the Matrice 600. We will support the full Mavic series, the Phantom 3, the Phantom 4, Inspire 1 and 2, the M200 and the M600. There are certain aspects of these drones that we're not able to fully implement at launch. The manipulation of some of the thermal imagery, for example, on some of those birds. And we're not able to command drones that have built-in monitors. So the Phantom 4 Plus versions that have the built-in monitor, we're not able to sideload our app onto those controllers yet.
That's interesting, and so that would include like if you had the smart controller for your Mavic 2.
We're not able to sideload on the smart controller yet. That's that's forward work.
Yeah, understood. I know Bill, the drone reviewer, is anxious to ask a question. So thanks for your answer, Scott. I'm going to throw it over to Bill, the drone reviewer.
You bet.
Like them, Scott, I'm a child of the 60s as well. And let me put it to you this way. I remember when John Glenn lifted off, my mother set a table in front of the TV, and I watched that and was listening to Walter Cronkite and Wally Schirra, and we would flip the channels to Jules Bergman on ABC, and it was just an exciting time. And I think one of the questions that I'm really curious to ask you. I follow a guy. His name is Kels, and he has a site called 7-4 Gear. He's a 747 pilot, and what he does is he reviews aviation movies to say how authentic they are.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess that's one of my first questions is, there are just scads of movies out there. There's Apollo 13, there's Gravity, there was Mars with Matt Damon. I mean, all the movies about outer space. Which ones would you say would be more realistic than other ones?
A great question, and I'll tie in John Glenn into my response, since he was a hero of both of ours. And not to name drop, but I'm going to name drop, I guess. But one of the great thrills of my life is I got a chance to fly with John Glenn when he came back on STS-95 at age 77 to fly aboard the shuttle, and I got a chance to be his crewmate and be his physician during that incredible flight. But the story relates to John Glenn. So the movie that is least representative of space is Armageddon.
Yeah.
So I remember it was right before the launch. This movie had just come out, and in fact, they had filmed a bunch of scenes actually at the Kennedy Space Center. So there's a lot of buzz and excitement for it. And we were down there for our dress rehearsal before the launch. It's called the Terminal Countdown Demonstration Test, or TCDT. And so we wanted to get out of our crew quarters and have a meal, down in Cocoa Beach. So we did that. We went and saw the movie Armageddon together as a crew, and everyone was in the movie theater was leaning in and with rapt attention. And the seven of us, a part of our crew, we were all busting up laughing, and they didn't know what to make of us. Why were they laughing at this at this space movie? But they didn't know who we were until after the movie. But yes, Armageddon is not at all representative of space. But my favorite movies, 2001: Space Odyssey, great movie. I love Interstellar. Apollo 13 is certainly my favorite, though. They actually filmed much of that movie in actual weightlessness. They actually flew an aircraft that we call the Vomit Comet, but it's a large aircraft, a KC-135, that could fly in kind of a porpoising trajectory. And at the apex of each wave, the pilots would push the nose forward down in the plane, and we have about 20 or 30 seconds of weightlessness. And so Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon and Bill Paxton and the rest of the guys filmed the movie, the microgravity scenes in weightlessness. And so they were really true to Jim Lovell's crew and the actual happenings of that mission, and they filmed it in an incredibly realistic way. So I just love that story, but also the way that was shot. And I also love The Martian. There's some things, the physics of certain things are not representative. However, the movie really suspended disbelief. It really brought me in, and I thought that was a great movie too.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned John Glenn, because I was living and working in Ohio at the time, and John Glenn was, as you know, they named the airport in Columbus. It's John Glenn Airport out there. One of the very neat things was they had a parade for him in Columbus, and I was standing up at the curb, and he looked at me, he pointed, and he waved, and I'll never forget that moment the rest of my life. That was just incredible. After that mission, that was just absolutely fantastic. Got to follow up though. I do have another one. One of my favorites, and Apollo 13 was one of my favorites, but I also like The Right Stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That just, from going from Chuck Yeager, through all the Mercury 7 astronauts, I just loved it because, well, I read the book, and, I know they take liberties in movies and everything, but, a lot, and this is what I try to tell my wife, a lot of those simulations and those tests, what astronauts go through are real. I mean, it's, they really kind of, you're put to the test.
Absolutely. I think they create some of those tests just to haze us to see if we really want the job or not. But as I described my selection, they ran me through every medical test known to medical science and then some. But I remember one that was really kind of funny. It was a test basically to see if we were claustrophobic, but they put us in what they called this personnel rescue sphere. It's about the size of a large beach ball, and completely opaque, so that no light gets in or out. And they put electrodes on us in a comm cap and tell us, hey, we're going to have you evaluate this as part of your selection process. Just go in there and make some observations, and we'll come get you in a while. They don't tell you how long they're going to leave you in there. And thankfully, I'm not claustrophobic at all. I fell asleep, and I passed the test. But
well, and now I'm going to switch gears for a second and about the FT Aviator. I guess it's just absolutely incredible. And there's a couple of people who are in the chat tonight who are handicapped. And when I first saw your product online, I literally almost jumped out of bed. I was telling my wife about it. I said, "You got to see this." And she says, "What?" And she looked, she goes, "Oh, it's a joystick." I said, "It's not just a joystick. Okay.
Right.
You don't understand, because, I know, for example, one of my friends, Mike Roach, and he's in the chat tonight. He's paralyzed from the waist down. So one of the things that's important to him is precision landing with the DJI aircraft. And that's something I ended up calling the DJI's attention, and they got the issue addressed with the Mavic 2, because I had almost crashed on my first flight because I was assuming it had precision landing. That's a necessary thing for him, because he can't bend over to pick up his drone. Right. And seeing this come out, it's just mind-boggling how the doors can be open incredibly to just so many people, and even people with partial handicaps, or who may have rotator cuff, or who knows what kind of injury limits their mobility, but yet they still have a good hand, and they can do that. That's just incredible, Scott. I have to commend you on this.
Well, thank you. No, I'm really excited to be able to provide this technology for those who do have mobility issues, because and I would add that I think that the technology improves the capacity for all of us to fly, whether you have the use of both upper extremities or not. But really, what we've done is taken the complexity of flying. We've been flying radio-controlled assets, drones and airplanes and helicopters, with our thumbs since the 1930s. That's how they've always been flown. We've had no true innovation in control systems for over 8 decades. That's really where it stands. We've learned how to adapt ourselves to using both of our thumbs or the pinch method using 2 controllers, but it's requires the brain in our bodies to do an iterative, a little bit of this and a little bit of this ends up in a result of motion in our drone. And if we can put it in a single hand, basically our thumb tip becomes the virtual nose of the drone. So as long as you've got one hand that has good range of motion and mobility, your thumb tip becomes the nose of the drone. And anything you do with your thumb tip, whether you raise your thumb or depress it here, depressing the trigger to descend, raising the thumb to ascend, or go forwards, backwards, left, right, or change the yaw. So in a single hand, we're having purity of motion, and we also can feel in our hand the pushback of the spring force. So you always know when you're inputting a command in each of those 4 degrees of freedom. So there's no ambiguity. Our minds know exactly what our thumb is doing, and by process of logic, we know what's going to happen to our drone. And so I'm really excited to help your friend. One of my good friends, his name is Miles O'Brien. He's actually the CNN turned PBS journalist. He used to be the lead Space Beat reporter. He would cover all of our launches, and we became good friends. He lost his arm tragically in an accident while on location. A bunch of equipment fell on his arm. He ended up having a compartment syndrome and needing to have a surgery to remove his arm. And so now he's going to be able to fly as well. People who've had strokes and have other reasons for challenged mobility, they can mount it using a 1/4-20 on an armrest or some other adapter. I think we'll be able to fly just as well as anybody else.
One more question, and then I'm gonna pass it on. How long of a charge does the joystick hold? How long can you use it before it needs recharging?
Well, we designed the battery for 5 hours of continuous flight, which is more than a long day of flying. If you're flying a battery, coming back, changing, and going back out, that'd be more than a day's worth of flying. We actually have rigorously tested this device. However, we established that the battery will last on a single charge 31 hours. So that's more than I would hope most people will be flying. So we're in pretty good shape. And if that weren't enough, Bill, you can actually fly it on a brick. So we have a USB-C here, so you can actually fly it while being charged.
Wow, yeah. You have unlimited power. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Curtis, you're up.
Hey, well, first I want to do a couple of things from the chat over here. First of all, Drone Addiction said, couldn't miss this one. Eyes are burning. I'm staying up late to see Scott. So Scott, some folks in here really, really want to see you. And there's a lot of people that are commenting on the questions that we gave you earlier. They're really excited about the answers you gave. Insight like that into an astronaut and somebody like yourself, their things they've done in their life is just amazing. My questions and the things that I want to kind of bring forward about the FT Aviator is the lower portion of the Aviator. So the camera controls, the speed controls, I'd like for us to get into that, because the thing that I like about the product is that you really don't have to go into the app anymore. Everything's in your hands. So if you want to elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, that's great, Curtis. Thank you for queuing that up, because it is one of the real disruptive elements of the FT Aviator. So what we have in our dominant hand is the joystick, or the flight control, but in our non-dominant hand, that's where all the magic happens, for the camera control system. So as I said, flight becomes almost subconscious, and so you can really focus on the imagery that you're out there to get. And I don't, and this is not only my own personal wish, but talking to lots and lots of really experienced drone pilots, it's a real hassle to dive multiple layers deep in an app to change the exposure compensation and all the other parameters of flight. So what we've done is we've actually made a lot of, we think, smart investments in camera controls. So on a traditional radio, you actually pull from side to side for adjusting tilt. I always forget which way is tilt down and which way is tilt up. There's no ambiguity with FT Aviator. You pull down, your camera's going to go down.
Hold it up just a little bit higher, Scott. There you go.
So down and up. So there's no ambiguity in terms of the direction of your camera tilt. We also have a number of controls here on the side of the controller. We have the video start, stop, and then the shutter for a camera. And then finally up top here, we have a scroll wheel that you can toggle. You press down, you hear a click, and you can rotate through the ISO, the shutter speed, the aperture, the exposure compensation, the responsiveness of the camera tilt. And you see it all live on your app. And it's a really nice looking app developed by drone experts, our friends at Spark Aerial that we work with very closely. So it'll be very familiar to DJI pilots. All the stuff that you're accustomed to will be in the same places, but then we have some additional things there that show you what you're changing on the fly. So you can be flying out to your work site and getting your exposure just right instead of having to stop and then tap on your smartphone to get those things set up.
That's really cool. Now, I kind of have a bone to pick with you though, because I spent probably a year learning how to orbit and do figure eights. And in my previous conversations with you, apparently it's pretty simple with this thing.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You've mastered a skill that doesn't need all that much training anymore.
Right. Can you kind of go through the process so everybody will understand how easy it is to do now?
It's so cool. And you can get your kids out there, your wives or whomever who's not had a chance to ever fly a drone, and within 30 seconds you can have them doing a figure eight. I promise you this. So a figure eight, all it is, it's a little bit of a forward motion and a little bit of a yaw, and that will give you a perfect circle. You keep the forward tilt, and then once you get back to the starting point of the circle, you twist equally to the opposite side, and that will give you the figure eight. It's really that simple. So a little bit of a forward stick, a little bit of a twist, that's your circle. Then you twist it back to get your figure eight. To do an orbit, a little bit of a lateral motion and a little bit of a twist in, and you're going to orbit whatever it is on the ground. You can adjust the camera tilt to track your target. You can ascend. You can fly like a pro within just a few moments of experiencing this thing, as opposed to spending weeks and weeks to really master the twin sticks.
Well, not only that, not having to use the app now to get out there, and if you're in a professional situation with a director who's standing over you saying, "Ooh, I just discovered another shot I want you to do. Can you orbit around the lighthouse now, as opposed to just laterally flying up? Can you orbit now?" It's not no more do you have to dial in the app and go find the function and dial everything. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll just do this right here. So It makes it the concept and the way it works just makes it super, super easy. One other thing you haven't covered yet is the rabbit and turtle mode. Yeah,
right. So thank you for reminding me on that. So what we found is that to really make the most of a battery's worth of capacity, you want to get to your work site as quickly as possible, but then you want to really dial it down and get cinematographic. You want to put the drone and the camera in jello mode. So we have from 1 to 5. I was tempted. I don't know if any of you guys are Spinal Tap fans. I was thinking to have it from 1 to 11, but okay. but
definitely.
But we have it from 1 to 5 or from tortoise to hare. So really slow, setting of 1 to a setting of 5 up at the top. So you can get out to your work site really quickly, and then you can dial it back down and really put it into a subtle mode so that you can get that perfect shot, that perfect inspection. And so we have different response curves built in to that element of the base unit. And there's one other thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about, which is our situational awareness display up here. And I hate to admit this, but I'll admit it on air. I have lost sight of my drone on occasion. It does happen in low contrast environments. It just happens. And so, where is it? Well, we have a ring of LEDs here that will actually show you your azimuth, where the drone is in the sky, and then another internal ring that shows the relative yaw. So all you need to do is point towards your drone, straighten it up, and then you can pull it straight back to you, as opposed to hitting the return to home button here on the controller or on your app to kind of get back in an emergency. I'd rather be in control, and the situational awareness display gives us that capability.
I want to interject for just a quick second. I'm sorry, Curtis.
Go ahead.
Manny Navarro had a great question. Does the joystick self-calibrate to the range of motion of the user? I'm sorry, Curtis. Go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead.
That's an interesting question. So we factory calibrate the controller, so it'll come to you completely calibrated. There are ways in which we could recalibrate the sensors within this, but they should not need it, quite honestly. But the range of motion of each of these axes is predetermined. So we I think have plus or minus 22 degrees, for example, on the yaw. That it's not going to be anything more or less than that. That's what we found to be very comfortable for most pilots. So we built that as a result of human factors testing. So there shouldn't be any need to require any additional calibration, but should there for some reason be a sensor drift in the future, we have the ability to recalibrate it.
This would be a good opportunity for you folks in the chat, if you have any questions about this, to go ahead and drop those in there. We're going to get all these questions answered for you. You kind of answered my other question about situational awareness as far as the app on there. And one of the questions that's kind of coming up is, how do you look at your tablet? Now, I kind of know the answer to this, so I'm leading you with this. So I'll just turn that part over to you, because you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, so we have a number of ways in which we can present the video feed from your drone. So one of the options is by use of the included smartphone adapter, which kind of clicks onto the side of the device like this, and you can put your smartphone here. But there are other ways in which we can do this as well. So what I prefer to do is fly with, say, for example, you're flying a Phantom or Inspire or Matrice generation. I like to actually put the tablet in that radio, and I like to fly sitting down. So that's my preferred way of flying. There are other adapters that we are looking to distribute that actually would have a tablet mount that would sit right here. So kind of right mid-chest level, and then you would just have the FT Aviator free-handed beneath that and flying. So we're going to be posting a number of additional photos on our website in the not too distant future to show all the different ways in which people have elected to fly. A lot of people actually like to fly with their FT Aviator on a tripod base, and then put their monitor on a secondary arm on that same tripod. Lots of different variations possible.
Lauren Donner earlier so this would probably be the Lauren Donner earlier from Canada asked, it's a little tough for the Canadian exchange rate as far as purchasing a drone or purchasing the FT Aviator. Currently, you're only releasing this in the United States, and this is correct, right?
Well, so we are actively working on our CE mark, and we expect to be shipping internationally to select countries in the third quarter of this year, so not too distant future, to include Canada. So don't fear, it will be available to you very, very soon. There's some additional things that we need to do to get through our CE certification, but we're excited to provide it not only to Canada, but to Europe, Japan, I believe Australia and New Zealand are among the countries that we'll be able to ship to by Q3.
Well, that was my questions. Who do I turn this over to now? You guys have this turnover thing here. Are we going to Marcus?
Yeah, go to Marcus. There you go.
I've got a couple of observations and an FT Aviator question and another astronaut question. So the situational awareness thing is a big deal to me, because like you talked about, Scott, I can't tell you how many times I had inadvertently yawed the drone and I didn't know which direction it was facing. So that's awesome, and thank you so much for that. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to is that paddle for controlling the gimbal. So much, I like that idea so much better than a scroll wheel. It seems to me that it's going to give you a finer control of where you're pointing that camera to. So that's awesome. One of my concerns, and I'm looking forward to receiving my FDA.
Sorry, guys. Getting a call here, and I just discarded it, but hopefully I didn't lose the line with you.
Nope, you're still here. You're still here.
Okay, good.
So you have to carry the RC with you, obviously, right? You're hooked to the RC. How do you carry that? Where does that go? And will you have some rigs available at some point that you can just kind of put it all together?
It's a great question, and you're exactly right. So we are beholden to the native radio that you currently fly your DJI drone with. We've not replaced the transmitter receiver transceiver that comes with your drone. That's something that we would love to be able to integrate into future versions of this, but that's probably a couple of years off. But it's really a non-event. Having flown hundreds of hours with us now, all variants of the FT Aviator and DJI fleet. So there are a lot of different ways. One of the ways that we've been shipping with, we may or may not continue to do this, but we do offer, at least in our first shipments, a lanyard that you can see here, and this actually would clip into your Phantom and above style radio, or if you had a Mavic style radio, you would actually use a little mini belt like this that would sit around the waistband of the Mavic radio, and you could clip onto it, and you could actually have this around your neck, and your radio would sit kind of at waist level, antennas facing forward, and you'd have really good communication with your drone. What I prefer now, actually, with the Mavic style radios with the twin arms, I actually just put one of the legs of the radio into a pocket, and it sits there just beautifully. The antennas face forward, and I don't have anything around my neck, and it's really not a factor at all, and I have complete mobility, and it's wonderful. For the larger radios, it has I should have had one of the radios down here with me, but there's a bar that sits underneath the Phantom and above radios. I put my belt loop through that, and so it sits on my waist on the side, and so I'm completely unencumbered, and I can run around with my drone and have have the flexibility I want for flying on the go. So there are ways in which you can support your radio around your neck if you want to, but I think a lot of pilots are going to find that they like either putting on a belt or in a pocket, or perhaps putting it on their tripod stand if that's the way they prefer to fly.
Thank you for those tips, because that's going to get me kind of ahead of the game a little bit. I've got both of those radios, so that'll be good to know.
Great.
So now then, as for the astronaut question, so I know on STS-95 you flew with John Glenn, and we were just, all of us civilians, we know of John Glenn from the right stuff, like Bill was saying earlier. Can you kind of just give us a flavor of what kind of a guy was he, and how was he to work with, etc.?
He's one of our greatest Americans of all time. He was a humble hero. Country before self. You felt that being around him. I remember the first time he walked into our crew office. We had just been assigned. We're all incredibly excited. He flew in from Washington, D.C. He was still a United States Senator at the time, but he flew in to start his training. And I'd met him before. Every couple of years we have reunions with all the old timers, and so I met him, and but now I was meeting him almost anew as a crewmate, and he walks in the room and he says, "If any of you guys call me Senator Glenn, I'm just going to ignore you. I'm just John, or payload specialist number 2." And he meant it. I mean, he wanted to be just a member of the crew. No special treatment. He wanted to be a part of everything, no matter how menial. The least glamorous maintenance jobs, he'd be the first one to sign up for it. He was just that kind of a person. He He didn't have any airs about him. He was genuinely interested in everyone around him, appreciative of the opportunity to fly again. You know, he was such a revered hero back in the day that President Kennedy said, you know, we can't risk losing our American icon, so you're never going to fly again. And that's really why he retired. I think he would have remained in the astronaut program had it not been for the fact that he knew he wasn't going to get a chance to fly.
Yeah, so, kind of what happened to Yuri Gagarin in the Soviet Union.
That identical. Yep, that's right.
Yep. Okay, Ron Brown.
Scott, I'm going to kind of segue on what Marcus was asking, like a deeper dive. Okay, so you explained how the drones RC, you have it on a lanyard or on a belt type of thing, and it's still working. But how does the Aviator connect with the RC? Does it wire or through Bluetooth or?
Yes. So a great question. So both is the answer. C, both. So in fact, I'm going to take this opportunity just to show you the app, just so you get a quick flavor for it, and then hopefully this will display for you. I can't really see my display. This is the landing page. This is kind of our launch page. It'll show you the whole network of assets that we use to operate the FT Aviator. So from the left to right, it's got the FT Aviator, your smartphone, the DJI radio, and then the drone itself. And when it's all powered up, you can see the battery percentages, your connectivity, your return to home altitude, all that good stuff. And then you hit, I'll just quickly show you this. Obviously, we don't have a video feed here, but this is your flight page with all of your data up top in the top row, and your ability to toggle between the DJI radio and the FT Aviator and a map, and your camera assets over here. So it'll be very familiar to folks. But getting to your question, the way that all this hooks together, we're Bluetooth from the FT Aviator to the smartphone, and then we're wired. So in the case of an iPhone, it's a lightning cable, USB lightning cable to your DJI radio, and then through the DJI radio up to the drone. So Android, it uses a USB-C cable instead.
Okay, great. That makes sense. And one comment, since you have this great Aviator controller, and looks like you have a great app or whatever, maybe someday, I know you can't say anything, maybe there could be a drone in your company's future.
Well, it'd be really cool to do that, but boy, knowing what I know now about how difficult bringing a new product to market is, especially a complex one like this or a drone, I'm very thankful that we're at this stage right now. But
good answer. Okay, I got an astronaut question. We talked about the right stuff, and we talked about John Glenn. Did you ever get a chance to meet Chuck Yeager?
Yes, I have. Yeah, and what a great storyteller and amazingly down to earth guy he is as well. I met him in New York City at a big event, and he was receiving this award, and he told stories of his early days like it was yesterday. I mean, we all felt like we were in the cockpit with him, breaking the sound barrier. Pretty amazing. Human being, the bravery that those guys had back in those days when, I don't know what the stats were, but a lot of the flying machines that they were flying out there at Edwards, weren't ready for prime time. And a lot of the roadways that are, as you know, out there are named for pilots that didn't make it back. And they still went up the next day and flew again. So that they were really brave aviators.
Thank you for that, Scott. I'm going to throw it back to Bill, the drone reviewer. I'm sure he's got some more good questions coming at you.
Scott, I got an astronaut question, and one of the things that greatly humbled my kids and I was when we went past the astronaut memorial down at Kennedy Space Center, and just walking by and looking at some of them and everything. How was it for you? You were probably in the program when Columbia was lost. it has to be such an indescribable feeling for you. Am I right?
It was the most devastating time of my professional life, and and personal life as well. These were close friends and colleagues. In fact, in this particular case, I was the family escort. Rick Husband, the commander of the mission, asked me to be there for his family and the other crew members' families during the flight. And so, myself and a few others were there on the rooftop of the Launch Control Center during that launch, and we took the families to mission control during the mission so they could talk to their families on video teleconference. And we expected them to come home just as pretty much every other shuttle had done in the program history, 16 days into flight. But unbelievably, 16 minutes before landing over the skies of Texas, that shuttle had a breach in its left wing, and there's a catastrophic failure. And not only did the shuttle not make it home, but our close friends did. And so it was a gut-wrenching time for me personally. And I really seriously considered hanging up my spacesuit, but I knew this crew in particular, and also from the families, that they would want us to continue. The benefits of the work that we do in space are worthy of taking risk, and so it was really a galvanizing period in NASA's history where the entire agency gathered steam together and first off figure out what had happened, but vowed to never let it happen again. So we worked countless hours, almost nonstop for 2.5 years, developing tools and techniques to make it safe to fly the space shuttle again. And so I'm really proud of the work that the entire NASA team did to get back to flight, but also to honor that great crew.
And personally, this is coming from me. Everyone who has ever stepped on board a spacecraft and has been in outer space or has been a part of the program has been a personal hero to me, because and you said it, the benefits that we get from the space program are incredible. And it was gut-wrenching to hear those words. I was watching the broadcast and waiting for Columbia to land, and you kept hearing Houston, radio comm check, and it was just in dead silence, and it was just horrific. But thank you for taking the time to share that, because I know it was a hard time, but yet, and I'm so thankful that you decided to stick with the program and help things out. So
thank you, Bill. Appreciate those words.
You're very welcome. Back to the Aviator. Okay. I've been in computers for 30 years. That's been my career. I started out as a developer, programmer, and now I do quality assurance testing. And I test software every day for the best supermarket in the Southeast, Public Supermarkets. There's a plug for my company. Anyway, okay. My question is, how did you quality assurance test the Aviator? Because I have what I follow. We call them test cases. Okay. And whenever we make change to the software, we follow, it's a routine set of things that we follow, A through Z, to make sure that when we put this back into production, that it's going to work, and that we're not going to get a call from the vice president of IT saying, why isn't this working? So can you kind of walk me through how you test an FT Aviator?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we come from kind of the same, rigorous test background, Bill. So, in the space program and also in medicine and areas where I've worked, failure is not an option, or at least it's not a good option, right? So you have to be really rigorous in the testing that you do. So we have been really anal retentive, basically, really rigorous in the approach that we've taken to our testing. So we have done life cycle testing. We've put these things on robotic rigs and done tens of thousands of cycles, more than a year's worth of daily use cycling to make sure that the mechanicals work. We've defined and tested to all the what we call corner cases for our app and firmware to make sure that every combination and permutation of flight experience won't result in some unwanted behavior, for example, a flyaway. So we've made our highest priority to fail safe, and that was always the criteria in the space program as well. In areas where you need redundancy, you build it in, but always find ways to fail safe. And so we have tested exhaustively. I can't say that we're going to launch all of our code and we're going to be without bugs. I've flown hundreds of hours of the FT Aviator across the entire DJI fleet, but there are going to be people who have a slightly different configuration, a slightly different Android or Samsung phone or whatever, and it's got a special function and it's going to do X, Y, or Z, and we'll learn from it and we'll deal with it. But I feel really good about the rigor in which we've tested these things, and when we do make a change to the software or to the mechanical systems, we have a test matrix that we run through, and it involves testing every major function of the mechanicals and every major function of the software to assure that it's going to behave in a predictable way.
And I guess in conjunction with that, and then we'll get to everybody else to get some final questions in. As far as I know DJI is big on having tutorials, and for me personally, I've gotten great response from them on Twitter as far as their support is concerned. So how are you going to be following, as far as, will you be having a set of a tutorial on the FT Aviator, and how's your customer support going to work?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that question, Bill. And in fact, just last night, I was out filming tutorials. We have a whole series of how-to videos, from the unboxing to, we've not posted this yet, but a walk through the app, getting to know your FT Aviator, kind of, fly like an ace is what we call this particular lesson that we're about to post. But, how do you really get to master the FT Aviator? Mastering the camera systems. We've got a number of tutorials that will be on our YouTube channel. So we'd welcome people subscription to the Fluidity Tech YouTube channel.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Now, as far as support is concerned, are you going to have is it going to be by phone, online? How's that going to work?
Initially, we will have online customer service, and we have a fully populated FAQ, frequently asked questions, and then we'll be using a Zendesk. I'm not sure if you're familiar with.
Yeah, I have heard of it.
With Zendesk, but that's our kind of our customer service platform. So there will be people that will be manning the inflow of customer service questions, and for things that need to be elevated, you might be talking to me, because the level 2 questions, if they aren't simple to respond to, they'll either talk to myself or my director of manufacturing or my CFO and co-founder.
How is that for customer service? Wow.
Yeah. talking to the man himself. Curtis, let's do a last round of final questions and thoughts, and then we'll kind of close up here.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I want to go to the chat over here. Lauren Donner has a great question for you, Scott. Using the linking system that you currently have, is there any sort of lag whatsoever from?
Yeah, great, Lauren. So there is no perceivable latency in the hands of dozens and dozens of pilots. We actually sample from the FT Aviator to your smartphone at about 100 hertz or 100 times a second. So when you input a command, it's going to happen imperceptibly out on your drone. So it's really crisp in its responsiveness.
And my other follow-up question, maybe I'm lurking here a bit, but I followed on your YouTube channel where you recently had a chance to fly the M600 using the FT Aviator. What was the experience like that? Because it was a short video, but one of the things that I've always been concerned about, because I've not flown the M600, is it's circular. So I'm thinking, how do I keep what's forward, what's back? What was your experience like?
I loved it. What's so cool about the M600 and flying with the FT Aviator is it's nimble. You wouldn't imagine something the size of a kitchen table or almost a kitchen table can zip around that quickly. But you're moving around like a fighter pilot, and so as you move your hand, if you got it set up at 5, you can scream across the sky, and you can do really tight figure eights and orbits. And I had a grin on my face. I've had a chance to fly it quite a bit now out in San Diego, and I love the platform. The situational awareness, the nose versus the tail of the ship, it's really great with our FT Aviator, because we always know where that nose is based on the feedback that we have on the head of the controller. So I never felt lost. I could always tell where it was, even if I couldn't see the position indicator lights. If it was at a distance from me, I always had a really good sense of direction of travel.
That's awesome. So I guess I should pass this off to Marcus.
Perfect. Well, Scott, you've really answered all of my FT Aviator questions. And by the way, I've been lurking on the YouTube channel for a while, so I think I've watched most of those videos. Very excited about it. But I have kind of a two-part, another space question. So I know on STS-86 you stopped at Mir.
Yeah.
And I know you trained on the Soyuz too. I'm interested in your opinion of the Soviet space hardware. And then also, we're looking forward now. Boeing has the Starliner, and then of course SpaceX has Dragon. I know you probably didn't personally work with that hardware, but I'm sure you have an opinion on it, and I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Well, getting to the first question, that comparing and contrasting Soviet versus or Russian hardware with American, it's interesting to look at a Soyuz capsule today. It's really not that far afield from Yuri Gagarin's Vostok capsule. I mean, it's been slow evolutionary improvements over time. So when you look at a Russian weld, for example, I mean, it's beefy, and the structure is just, it's bomb-proof, and you realize whatever you do to it, it's probably going to do okay. American technology has been revolutionary in its stepwise gains, and so they've used computer-aided design and fluid physics and finite element analysis, and they've designed technology to meet the requirements with a safety factor, and so it's sleeker, it's more efficient. They both do the same thing. They support human life in a very dangerous, unscripted, challenging environment of outer space, but they are quite different. Some of the life support systems overlap a little bit, but it's quite striking when you look at for example, Elon Musk's capsule, the Dragon capsule, versus a Soyuz capsule today. They're almost unrecognizable in the way that they've evolved. But looking at just getting one more observation. So one of the things that the Russian program did extremely well, I think, was in their evolution of their space station. So they started in the space station program about the same time that we did with our Skylab. The U.S. program, of course, went off into wing flight and developing the space shuttle. But we've learned a lot from the Russians, and I think vice versa. And it's been a very strong partnership. They've helped us, we've helped them. And I do hope that international collaboration is the way that we go forward, back to the moon and onto Mars. So, but your second part, contrasting Boeing's Starliner versus the Dragon, I think both have great potential. I understand that both of them have some technical hurdles before they're ready to support the first cruise. But quite honestly, I would fly on either one of them if they would let me. Yeah, I know. But I don't think either of us have that option right now, unfortunately.
Well, so my closing thoughts. Gosh, I just can't thank you enough for spending time and answering. Just a guy that flies drones answering my questions. So with
Enjoyed
that,
it.
thank you, Scott, and I'll pass it off to Ron.
Great.
Thank you, Marcus. I'll make a comment before I ask a final question. I just want to thank you, Scott, for your service to the space program and being brave. And this is coming from somebody who takes a 4-hour plane ride to Florida and can't wait to get off the plane because it's too much for me being in the air, that thing. So I mean, I really admire what you've done with the space program. Again, I want to thank you for doing, because again, as a child of the 60s, I've always been interested in the space program. I always loved the sci-fi movies like we talked about, 2001: Space Odyssey. When I saw it as a kid, I didn't understand it, but I still thought it was great. Just great to see it or whatever, just the tech and whatever. But I guess my last question will be about the Aviator again. We talked about the price, so we kind of know the ballpark price. But this is another two-part question. When do you think customers will get the Aviator in their hands? And the second question is, will big-time YouTube channel reviewers get it first, or will it go to the customers first?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for your kind words, and it's certainly an honor to serve. And I was very fortunate to be in the right place in the right time to do that. But in terms of the Aviator itself, we are shipping. In fact, the first products are on their way to our Kickstarter supporters based on the order in which they backed us. There are a number of thought leader review units that are also being shipped out. They're a separate lot of controllers, but for the product that has been manufactured, they're already on the way. They're being shipped in a kind of a rolling list. So our first pallet is at the distribution center at FedEx. Another pallet arrives, I think, tomorrow, and then we'll have another pallet that arrives early next week. So the churn is on, and of course, the orders continue to roll in. But we hope to be caught up with all of our customers within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Great answer, Scott. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it back to Bill.
Scott, again, I'm gonna get to my questions here in a second, but I do want to again echo what Ron said and what Marcus. We really do thank you for your service to your country. My dad was a veteran, a World War II veteran, and I'm very proud of people that serve their country. And you did that. You did this. It's just the good that has come out of the space program is just, I think at times immeasurable. So again, personally, I want to thank you. You and everyone who has stepped on board a spacecraft and worn a uniform is a hero to me. So again, thank you for that. An astronaut question, okay? We see a lot in the movies, what liftoff is like. And, I remember seeing the movie recently about Neil Armstrong and, the intense vibrations, gravity pushing down on you. Just in your own words, what did it feel like?
It's the most exciting, roller coaster ride of your life. It's sort of like being on the steepest roller coaster you've ever been on in your entire life, but it lasts for 8.5 minutes. So you go from 0 miles an hour on the launch pad on your back to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes, and you're all the while you're being squeezed back in your seat. For parts of it, you're at about 3 Gs or 3 times your normal body weight. Lots of noise and lots of vibration, especially on the first stage when those two white solid rocket boosters are on board with us. Our heads kind of bobble on the flight deck. It's sort of funny to watch the video, and it's kind of tough to even see the displays in front of you and see the text because there is a lot of vibration, but just a really exciting visceral ride, and then it's almost magical when you hit main engine cutoff or MECO. You feel like you're lurching out of your seat, flying out of your seat, and you look out through the forward windows of the space shuttle, and you can see the blackness of space overhead and the curvature of the Earth below. It's like an out-of-body experience. It's really wonderful.
That is absolutely incredible. And now back to drones. A couple of questions regarding drones. First of all, what is your favorite drone and why?
I've changed my perspective now. I've flown a whole bunch of different drones, but I really love the Inspire series of drones. Just their maneuverability, their power, the camera systems that are available on them. So they're not the easiest to travel with, unfortunately. They're quite large, but I really love the Inspire series. But I've also had quite a bit of time with the new Mavic 2 series, and what's packed into that little gem, and the fact that you can pop it in your backpack. It's really a wonderful tool for a lot of things, not only for hobbyists but for professional enterprise. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about is getting those types of tools coupled with an FT Aviator into every squad car, every fire rig, every search and rescue crew car. We can make drone flying accessible and really help a lot of people. And so I think that the Mavic 2 Enterprise platform coupled with an FT Aviator really makes it possible for almost anyone with a modest amount of training to do a lot of good with drones. So I'm kind of waffling there between the Inspire series and the Mavic 2.
And I don't blame you, because I've flown both. I've flown an Inspire 1, but I agree with you. Well, I'm a little biased. I have a Mavic 2 Pro, and and also a Phantom 4 Pro, but the Mavic 2 Pro is just time and time again, it just never ceases to amaze me. And I guess my closing question is this: a lot of people say that the drone market has reached what they call a saturation point, that there's nothing else that can be developed, that we have all the bells and whistles that we're ever going to get on something. And I was taking that for what it's worth. And then I had Sally French on. Now, Sally French is known as the drone girl. She's out on Twitter a lot. She's a fantastic ambassador, whether male or female, for drones and for hobbyists. And you know what she told me? I asked her the same question, and the answer that she came back to me, she says, "Bill, it never ceases to amaze me when DJI comes out with a new drone." Her words that came out of her mouth, she says, "Bill, that I never thought that they could do that, and they did that." And and I think the same here is too, Scott. What would you say to that?
I think these are incredibly exciting times to be in the drone world, and to be alive just in general. The advances that we're seeing in technology, the new capabilities that we have with technology have never been greater. The rapidity at which we can innovate is just unparalleled. And so whether it's a new technology like ours that will open up human potential, making it possible to fly things that would otherwise have been impossible for most people. I think our technology, not to make this all about fluidity, but the ability of one pilot to control many, to control swarms with minimal amounts of training, it's going to open up vast arrays of capability to make human machine interfaces interactive with automation and robotics. There are really exciting things happening there, I think, with sensor technology and advances there, signature recognition, artificial intelligence and deep learning, the ability to extract more from our environment, to do ever more complex things. I think it's really exciting time to be in the drone world. And I think humans by nature are inventive and creative, and
whoops, I think we lost Scott there.
Yeah, we lost Scott for a second.
am I still with you?
Yeah,
you're
okay.
Okay. Well, I was just wrapping up that I just saying that I think next year we'll have the same conversation, and we'll probably say the same thing that next year, what could they possibly come up with, and we'll be blown away again.
Well, what I'd like to do is have each one of you start with Marcus, and then after Ron, we'll have Scott give his closing thoughts, and then I'll go ahead and close things out. So,
if I could just interrupt for 1 second,
Sure
I'm going to get my power cable so that I don't run out of juice.
Oh, please do.
So I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Go for it.
Man, this is just phenomenal. It is so great to hear Scott's opinions. I mean, it's exciting about the FT Aviator, and then to hear his experiences is just beyond awesome.
Yes, I could not agree more, Marcus. Somebody said in the chat, we need to have Scott back just to talk about his experience as an astronaut. Well, we need also have him back to talk about his experience on Everest too. I mean, my goodness, wow.
Yeah. Well,
we'll go ahead and we'll start with Curtis, and then Marcus, Ron, and then Scott, and then I'll wrap things up.
Well, I just wanted to say, Bill, thank you very much for asking me to be on tonight. Scott, this is a second time that I've had an opportunity to talk with you. Again, I seem to always learn something new about the FT Aviator. I'm excited to have it on the way here pretty soon. But thank you for thinking outside of the box. In some aspects, we're really jumping ahead in technology, but it seems like in certain areas we're not thinking out of the box. And this is one of the products that is on everybody's horizon. They're really excited about this. So thank you for doing that. And Bill, again, thank you for having me on the show. I always enjoy coming on.
Oh, here. Curtis, you're always welcome. Anytime. And I was so thrilled when you asked me, do you want Scott on? I said I couldn't say yes fast enough. Okay.
The only other thing I want to add is Drone Owners Network Live. We're not going to be on this weekend because the wife and I are doing a little getaway. We're going to be coming back very, very strong. And I've got a second show because I'm having so much fun doing these live shows. I'm going to be starting one on my channel, the Drone Squad TV. So stay tuned for that. We got some fun stuff coming up. Marcus.
Okay, so like I said earlier, it's just phenomenal to be able to ask an astronaut like you, Scott, questions, and thank you so much for indulging us with a bunch of questions and answers. And I'm beyond excited about FT Aviator. As a 63-year-old man, you get a little bit of the shakes or whatever. Those joysticks are tough. The little gimbals, I mean, so having that joystick is going to be awesome, and really excited about that. And I got to put a plug in. I need to tell you, Scott, my dad is a 87-year-old father, is a Stanford grad too. So I needed to throw that in there. And Bill, the drone reviewer, thank you so much for having me on the panel tonight as well. Always a pleasure to be on your show. And pass it off to Ron.
Thank you, Marcus. Yes, I want to, thank Scott for being on the show tonight. It was great having you on. I want to thank Bill, the drone reviewer, for inviting me to this show. It was finally great to be on a show with Curtis. We've kind of crossed in the night or whatever and never met up, but we finally landed on the same show. And I have one closing suggestion for Scott. I think it would be great if either you or somebody from your company could come to Spin Up in Austin, Texas on October 19th. It's a drone meetup. You're going to have some of the most well-known people in the drone community there for an all-day event. And it'd be a great opportunity to show the Aviator off to many influencers and many customers right there. And a lot of these people are going to, take videos and put it on their massively popular YouTube channel. So just a suggestion, and I will be there that day. So if you are there or anybody from your company is there with the Aviator, I'll be sure to get video of it and post it on my channels as well. So I'll close out with that, and I'll throw it to, I guess, Scott.
It goes to Scott, yeah.
Scott for some closing thoughts.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's a great suggestion. I'd not heard of Spin Up, but we would love to be a part of that. And Austin is in our backyard, really. We're neighbors, and actually my son lives in Austin. he just graduated from college at Baylor, and he's got a great new job there in Austin. So it'd be a great opportunity to go visit him too. So I'd love to be part of Spin Up. Thank you. We'll put that on our radar immediately. And just for me, I just wanted to thank all of you gentlemen for the honor and the opportunity to present here on your show, Bill. It's been a great dialogue, and I appreciate the great questions. And we look forward to helping people get the most out of their drones. And so we're very accessible. We think we've brought a wonderful product to market, but we're always looking to make it better. So we look forward to feedback from the community, things that you'd like to see in the next generation. But we think that this is a couple of generations ahead in capability for pilots. We think it's going to give professional and novice pilots alike the opportunity to fly like pros and to get the best imagery possible. And so I'll leave it at that. Look forward to seeing you out on the flight line sometime.
Well, hopefully, I'm going to be at Spin Up, so it would be wonderful to see you there. I have a couple of things that I'm going to send you, and if later on in the chat or by email at buildadronereviewer@gmail.com, if you can go ahead and send me a mailing address. I have a Build a Drone Reviewer coffee mug, and I also have a Build a Drone Reviewer polo that I would love to be able to send to you for being on the show tonight.
Fantastic. I will do that right away. Thank you.
Also, I want to let everybody know I have links not only to Fluidity, but Scott's personal website, where you can learn just about everything you've ever wanted to know about Scott. And Scott, one of the questions or one of the comments in the chat I was noticing somebody said, can you have Scott back just so we can ask astronaut questions? and I said, you know what? I said, that would be a wonderful idea. Scott's a busy person, but maybe we could probably have him back sometime.
We could probably do that. You bet.
That would be great. Scott, I want to thank you for taking the time to get on the show. And Curtis, I'm only as good as my co-hosts that are on tonight. And I have the three of the best here with Curtis, with Marcus, and with Ron. You guys are exceptional. And, I want to make sure, to watch Drone Owners Network. Curtis said, they're not be on this Saturday, but they'll be on a week from Saturday. And Curtis is going to be starting up his own live show. Make sure you check that out. There'll be links in the description to do that. There's links for Marcus's channel, Idaho Quadcopters, and also for ZinoNation, and also for Ron's channel. So definitely check those out. Definitely subscribe. These guys do a fantastic job. Please make sure that you do that. That's a great way that we thrive on your watching us, and you give us this wonderful encouragement. Scott, we're very anxious to see the Aviator. You will, absolutely get all the plugs in the world from this channel, and I'm sure Marcus and Ron and Curtis will do the same thing. Whatever you need from us, you have advertising ad nauseum, because this is a product that's going to make a difference in people's lives. And also, one of the things that you had mentioned was about getting in the hands of like first responders as well too. And I think that's going to just be absolutely exceptional and top notch. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight to watch us. The comments in the stream were exceptional. Thank you so much, guys. If you have any additional questions, please leave them in the comments section or email me at buildthedronereviewer@gmail.com, and we'll get them forwarded to Scott. And when he gets a chance, we can get those answered for you, because I know a lot of you had some additional questions here regarding that. But again, I want to thank everybody. Scott, hang on. I'm going to close. And when I close, just stay on. Just don't close your screen out. Okay. We'll chat for a minute. I want to thank everybody again for watching tonight, and check out this product if it's something that interests you. It's exceptional. It's just I can't wait to see and to try one out myself. So, but anyway, want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and remember, it's a great day to fly. See you next week.